the killer applications don't exist because people don't know how to use quantum computers today. We need to enable access, let people play with it, learn it, understand it. That allows us as hardware developers to make the quickest decisions to make the most appropriate hardware. And it's like one analogy was like asking someone to design a website before the internet exists. You just can't do it.
Which real world applications are you most excited about? In the context of quantum computing capability being realized?
There's kind of, I'm excited for anything that's quite near term. So by near term, I think we're talking, more early quantum simulation or quantum machine learning application. The great thing about machine learning is you can apply it to many different things. I think most excited is quantum simulation. That's where we're going to get the things we've never been able to do before, when we can start simulating interactions between molecules. So things like drug discovery, which we know, it's a huge lead time for generating new drugs that can be 10 years and cost billions of dollars. In theory, we can start stimulating that from a quantum world to a world where actually we can imagine we could just simulate something and send it straight to manufacture because it's an accurate quantum simulation. So I think advances there are going to be absolutely staggering. I think in the early days, things like catalyst designs and new types of battery materials and things like that we'll see quite quickly. There's a lot of stuff that I'm like nerdly interested in optimization, but most of it's the banking sector. There's definitely gains. There's always gains for the banks and all this stuff. But there's some really unique things you could do there around matching for things like increased fraud detection and things like that. Sure. And they're actually starting to come together now. There's proof of concepts happening on quantum computers today where we can kind of see that within the next few years, we'll start seeing these real applications that will exist. But it's important to stress the technology is really early. And I think, I'd love to stand up and just be, I'm confident it's going to change the world, but empirically, we're still, early in that journey. We need to, kind of increase fidelities, increase qubits, decrease errors, and all the things that we've got world experts solving at the moment. But there's some really nice cases coming in. And I think the other really exciting thing is if we start leveraging classical technology in the right ways to start combining our quantum processing units, QPUs, with CPUs and GPUs in a hardware stack, we can actually start offloading tasks to the most appropriate processor to get an early computation advantage, which is super exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned obviously cyber and security a couple of times. I think what is a concern for you with quantum computing capability in the wrong hands?
It has the potential to. I think we're seeing this sort of quantum safe encryption become a reality, and I think that's wise. I think there is a world where at some point in the not too distant future we'll make a machine that can unlock today's files. So we've got to be mindful of that. It's very easy to get caught in a bubble where we're very fortunate and privileged to be in the UK, and there's a lot of security alliances with other kind of governments and regions. But there's also other governments and regions that maybe we wouldn't want to have that technology ahead of what we've got. So there's this kind of world where it slowly passes into political issues rather than technology issues, which is really shame, but it's something we definitely need to be mindful of, and we need to, be working with the right governments on to make sure that we understand what's going on in the world and we don't get necessarily caught out by other people that may have advances in other areas. So there's a few concerns around that, and we just have to be on it now. We just have to start building ethical policies. There's a few new tightenings of rules around export controls around quantum technologies, which is good, but as long as we're doing it in consultation with the tech companies that are trying to export things into certain regions. So, and we're quite advanced in so much as there's not many quantum computing companies that have made multiple quantum computers and then exporting them and run them in other countries. So we've got a Toshiko in Tokyo in a data center in Japan. So we've gone through some of the process of how do we demonstrate something in the UK, then how do we duplicate it with an engineering discipline, a bill of materials, export controls, set it up in another country and make it work for end customers to ultimately use. So we're starting to learn how the export controls are going to work. And again, this is nothing new, right? Semiconductors have done it. Encryption, network switches within dual use cases, they've done it. We just need to learn from that now so we don't end up engineering ourselves in a world where we can't have many quantum computers.
Will it exist in your lifetime, do you think, Simon?
I always say this, saying a lot, and you'll spot it everyone. We always say within the decade. We've been saying it for 5 years, but these things are coming quicker, and the rate of development is getting much, much quicker. And actually, just to sort of jump down a slight rabbit hole with it, and the big analogy I've got with my career growing up, people ask, like, what are the killer applications for quantum computer? And by and large, outside of the theory, they don't exist. The hardware isn't powerful enough today to do really meaningful things. We can start extrapolating and breaking down problems to offer some value today, but they're not really in a position where we're going to offer, the world's biggest banks, the biggest portfolio optimizations, or the chemistry company simulation. But we can definitely see a world where they're getting there. The thing that's accelerating that, even in my career in quantum at the moment, is access to quantum hardware and the computers themselves. So the killer applications don't exist because people don't know how to use quantum computers today. We need to enable access, let people play with it, learn it, understand it. That allows us as hardware developers to make the quickest decisions to make in the most appropriate hardware. And it's like one analogy was like asking someone to design a website before the internet exists. You just can't do it. The internet existed for passing bits of information around, and yet here we are doing a podcast over 200 miles with high quality audio. No one could have predicted that back when the first internet protocol ever existed. So similarly with quantum computers, the more we can give people access to them, the quicker that they can work out how to map their problems to the quantum information space, which isn't easy. And as a hardware programmer back in the day, programming assembly language on 16-bit machines, it's really hard to switch your brain out of classical mode into quantum mode. So we need to grow this ecosystem of quantum information programmers or quantum software developers to find the applications to run on the hardware. So those two things go hand in hand. And we've definitely seen, kind of bits of literature that would say to solve a problem, we need 1 million qubits. Nowadays, it's to solve that problem, probably 10,000 qubits is enough because people are learning. So those barriers are kind of coming closer and closer to jumping over the next kind of technical barrier. So I think it's coming in quicker. I know I would say that I'm kind of quite close to it, but things that we would say were 20, 30 years out are now probably 10 years out and are accelerating towards this as well. And, we're seeing some amazing deep technical results from a lot of quantum computer companies solving some of the real big challenges that were thought to be nigh on impossible 5 years ago. So the rate of development is staggering. And it's definitely picking up more. We can see, in the investment world as well, that there's some serious money going into it now from not just from private VCs, but from governments and things like that, where we recognize that the technology is here. It's here. It works. It's here to stay. It needs developing and mapping, but it's something that we have to assume is going to change the world for certain problem cases.
Yeah.
So we need to kind of be ready for it.
I think it's going to dramatically, obviously, if we crack this, then I think it's going to dramatically increase the efficacy of computational power. And what I mean is, we're now going to need less computers to solve problems, which obviously has an environmental effect and an ESG effect. So, is that something that's on your radar as well? Is that sort of a driver for you?
There's a couple of interesting points, and this is where I think the education of where we are sort of comes into play. So for our type of modality of quantum computer, which is superconducting type of quantum computer, we have to have cryogenics. So we run at cryogenic temperatures, so about 15 millikelvin. So we'll say
that increases the cost a lot, though, I suppose, doesn't it?
It does and it doesn't when you compare it to what the computational output is. So actually, when we first started, and this is actually one of the big experiences of OKC, when we first started, we had a dilution refrigerated cryostat in the lab. We're like, this thing uses 20 kilowatts of power. That's loads, blah, blah, blah. But actually, when you look at what you're using in classical computation, in the real world, it pales into insignificance.
Yeah, it's like Bitcoin versus the banking system, isn't it? Bitcoin uses a lot of energy, but look at the entire international banking system uses way more. But
that's right. And we can kind of see with our power consumption, which bolt a few of the other bits to it. Let's call it 35, 40 kilowatts of power for a quantum computer today. Most of that is in the dilution unit. So we can scale those processors from, our current commercial offering is Toshiko, which is a 32 qubit system. We could potentially scale that up into thousands of qubits for the same power consumption. And then we're in thousands of qubits. Suddenly we're outperforming some of the world's largest supercomputers at certain tasks. And those things are using megawatts and megawatts of power.